Good afternoon, everyone. We're glad to have you with us today. Um, Once again, we are gathered together to do two things as we go through this process. Bonnie and I are thrilled that we have all of you with us today. And so what we're going to do as we work through this process, we're actually going to go through and do kind of a two-part thing here. We're going to get some feedback from everyone, and then we're going to talk about what's going to happen in April, because now we're coming up to that final, oh, it's time for algebraic reasoning. So we're going to have a couple of different things going on. Just so you're aware at this point, if you have a question, please make sure that you ask that question. And if you take a look at the screen at this point, what you should see, just a few little housekeeping things. Now, we'll tell you that there are no handouts that are posted at this point. However, we will make sure those handouts, if you didn't get them through an email, that they're posted on Edmodo. But you also should see that you have, if your microphone's not working right or speakers, you can check on that. You have a place also for asking questions. And we really want you to do that. If you have a question, all you have to do is just click on that question box, type it in. It'll come through to us, and then we'll be sure and answer that question as we go through. And we'll make sure that we have plenty of time to cover any questions that you may have. Right now, all of your microphones are actually muted. But when we get into talking about the interim activities and the different things that you have been doing since we last saw you, we'll go through at that point, and as we call on people, we'll unmute your mic so that you can speak. We'll also make sure that if you tell us that, oh, I don't have a microphone, or I'm not on the phone, or however I can't talk, then we'll make sure that we make some adjustments for that as we're going through. So, a couple of other things. Let's just look very briefly here at the objectives of the webinar itself. And what you see is we're going to discuss some results of the interim activities themselves. We're going to preview a little on the CCR Mathematical Reasoning Institute Session 3. We're coming to the end of the year. And also just a few new tools and resources that are there for the classroom. So, having said that, Bonnie, I think we need to do a little polling first.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea, Susan. So what everyone's going to see in just a moment are a few questions, and what we'd like you to do is select the correct answer. And Susan, I think it will be self-explanatory for them in just a bit.
It should be.
Okay, then let's go ahead and launch that first poll. Which is, we want you to answer which of the following best describes your student's reaction to the activity that you did. And you'll notice that you have a number of choices there. So if you will, please click on your answer. And it looks like, Susan, that they would rather just do the math and get the answer, with the other two categories being pretty much half and half.
Yeah, well, you know, that's not surprising, is it, Bonnie? When you think about it, what do our students want to do? Just give me a chance to do the math. That's it. I just, you know, I don't want to think about all these other things as I'm going through. So,
okay, so since we know how the students responded, let's see what actual solving process each of you used. And you should see the poll there. Which of the following problem processes did you use in your class? So if you will click one that you used for us, please.
oh, I finally see somebody popping in with the SQRQCQ. Yay! Oh, come on, there's only 74% of you that have voted, 71% rather. Let's see if we can't push that number on up just a little bit further.
Oh, we have to at least.
Oh, there's 80%. Wow.
Okay, guys, couple more views before we close the poll. And let's do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's close the poll and see where we're at with 89% of you.
Wow. Just look at that. We have 56% who went for solve. That's a pretty high number. And, I'm hoping as we go through and some of you share with us, you'll talk about how students actually responded to that particular process. Bonnie, that's one of the first ones we started working with. And it seems to have been popular not only here, but in other places that we've been as well.
Definitely a strategy from the field. So let's go ahead and see. Were you surprised by your students' reaction to trying the new strategies that you implemented to solve those problems? This is a simple one, either yes or no. Susan, we're getting closer to that 90%. Maybe we can click, yes, we clicked over that one. So let's give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the poll is closed.
And look at that 60-40 split as we go through here in terms of how, whether or not people were surprised about the process. All right, sounds good. Hey, and 95% voted. Is that fantastic or what?
Oh, it definitely is. So let's go to another question. And we want to ask you, do you believe that that problem-solving graphic organizer and strategies that you use, did it help your students gain more confidence in solving math problems? So go ahead and vote for us, please. Oh, I need one more of you to vote so that we're over that 90% again, guys. Thank you, thank you. Okay, we're going to give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the poll is closed. And Susan, we have an astounding 85% who really do feel their students are a little more confident in that wonderful skill of problem solving. So I think that's great news, don't you?
Oh, I think it's good news too. And I did notice as we were, you and I talked about it as we were looking through some of the reflection forms, that in some cases for students, maybe those graphic organizers aren't quite the best thing for them. So maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that as we go through and have someone share with us.
You're so right. There's not just one way to do everything. So, last question that we'd like you to answer for the poll right now is, do you believe that your students will be more likely to take advantage of the different strategies than they have in the past? And so, again, we have a yes or no. All those different strategies that we talked about. What do you think? And we're going to do 5 more seconds. 5, 4, get your answer in. 3, 2, and 1, and the poll is closed. And Susan, I'm not sure this is a real surprise to us because it does seem that oftentimes our students just are not aware of all the different strategies that they can use. Rather, they think there's one perfect way. So I'm real pleased to see that almost 80% of you really do feel that your students are going to take advantage of some of those different strategies. And hopefully the rest of you, your students were already taking advantage of some of those strategies, and so they were comfortable with those. So,
Well,
great news, Susan.
yeah, well, one of the things I did notice as I was going through is that quite a few people did talk about the fact that their main concern was to make sure that they kept reminding students to do things that they needed to, go back through and review and kind of keep them on track to do it because, it's like anything where, you kind of have to get that habit going of thinking about, oh, is there another strategy that I could use? Is there something different that I could do in order to make this process work better? So, again, we have some students who well, they've got their tried and true and that's it. But, hopefully we have a lot out there now that are going to be doing lots of different things. So that's really good. And thank you all so much for participating in the polls. We're going to keep trying for that over 90% of you responding every time, but, we'll keep on going with that one. So what we'd like to do at this particular point in time is we'd like to go through and can we talk? Can we share some special moments from the hands-on learning that you did and the modeling, all the different types of things that you were doing as we're going through? So what we're going to ask you, or what we are asking you to do, and we'll call on some people kind of to get things up and rolling, but then please feel free to raise that hand and we'll call on you as well. But we'd like for you to kind of share an anecdote maybe regarding a student who was motivated by the activity, found some success, where they might have struggled before, was able to solve a word problem because he or she had learned new strategies. Or you can share how you modified things, how the activity to make it work for your students. And last but certainly not least in this process is your biggest takeaway from the experience itself. And so what I'd like to do, if I could, is I'm going to ask if I think it's Kelly. Is Kelly with us? Let's see here. Um,
Kelly Mitchell.
yes, Kelly Mitchell. I'm going to unmute your line and I'm going to ask Kelly. Um, Kelly, I think you made a comment about your students and how they were responding to the activity as they were going through. So, can you share with us if you have a microphone here or you're on the phone, either one? Could you share with us just a little bit about how the process went in working with your students?
Okay, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, wonderful. I just had about 2 to 3 students to try this activity out on, but as we went through these activities in our lessons, I really encouraged them to first of all read the question thoroughly and just kind of, absorb it for the first time. And then I would encourage them to go back and read the question a second time and then begin to think about, hey, what mathematical operation or operations am I going to use? And then begin to apply that operation using whatever strategies and tools we had talked about. And then lastly, and this was really hard to get them to read the problem 3 times, but after they've done that, read the problem one last time and ask yourself, does my answer even make sense? Because sometimes they would just get these off-the-wall answers that their calculator had produced, but the answer never made sense. So just getting them to slow down, follow a process, and read through the problem more than once seemed to be an effective strategy for us.
Well, and Kelly, part of the reason why I asked you to talk, and I'm so glad you brought it up from the standpoint of going through and doing that 3 times of reading, is I liked your comment, about them being hesitant to read a math
Mm-hmm.
problem 3 times because they often barely read it once.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it really is, and we have to think too in terms of our students because in their minds they're thinking about, oh, I'm going to take this test and it's timed and I don't have time to do this. And if I do this, I won't finish all my questions. But really, once they've kind of gotten in that habit, I just think
Mm-hmm.
about all the mistakes they no longer make if they can go through and do the process.
Sure.
But thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that
You're
very
welcome.
much. Okay, and I'm going to ask, let's see if Mitchell Wilson, is Mitchell with us today? I'm not sure if he's on yet or not. I don't see him. Maybe he'll be coming in a little bit later. I'm going to ask, because I did see your name here before, Samantha Roberts. And I have unmuted your microphone. You did something, you worked with the problem solving, but you did it working with fraction tiles, if I remember correctly. And Samantha, can you talk with us or? Oh, Samantha does not have a microphone here. Okay. Well, let me just, if I could, one of the things that Samantha did is that she worked with the fraction tiles and having students start to look for patterns. So Bonnie, I thought that was just a fantastic way of combining kind of where we were with manipulatives back in geometry, and then also looking at this real process here. And then what they were able to do is be able to find equivalent fractions and see different types of patterns emerging.
And that's so true. We have seen fraction tiles work so well in so many different situations, providing students with that why it works, why it happens, and then having that tangible so they can actually see it. And so I agree with you, Susan. I saw it and thought, wow, these things work at all levels. It doesn't have to be at the highest mathematical reasoning level, but it can also be at that very base level of learning. So great job.
Absolutely. And Samantha, maybe one of these days we'll actually get to talk with you when when we're on the webinar. But I understand when you don't have access to a microphone as far as that goes. Let's see. Another one that I wanted to talk to, if we could, and I'm not sure if they have a microphone or not, but Bonnie Prager. Um,
She's on the phone, we think. So, Bonnie, we're going to unmute you.
and okay, she doesn't
Oh,
have a pen in. So, um, no, unfortunately, we can't unmute Bonnie at this point. One of the things that, and I'll just bring it up from a standpoint of one of the comments that Bonnie and Jerry had made in terms of working with this was the fact that, they felt like, one of the real essentials was making sure that they continue in this process as students progress through in their math skills. They have to keep up with all of this and working through and using the graphic organizers and the different problem solving as they approach new concepts. And so I thought that was an interesting comment as we were going through. And do we have any hands up at this point? Does anybody would like to share something specific that they learned, gained, or whatever? If not, you never know. We'll probably call on you.
don't everyone be first.
Well, that having been said, and since I don't see anyone popping up with their little hands there, and let me look and see if we have Jackie Robertson. And Jackie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Yay! So
I'm
glad.
so nervous.
Jackie, could you talk a little bit to us about um, there was one thing that you made, one comment you made within your reflection form, which I got kind of a kick out of it, was the fact that you said that they didn't like filling it out, but they liked their results.
Yes, to them it looked like more work,
Mm-hmm.
but they learned that it led to the correct answer. And I learned that the number one reason they were getting wrong answers was because they didn't know what the question was.
Yes.
Yay.
You are absolutely right. And, I had to sit back and just kind of chuckle when I saw that comment because I thought how true this is. For all of us, so many different things as, Bonnie and I joke all the time about our attempts at fitness and, how we would get great results if we just did it. However,
That's right.
however, the reality is we haven't quite got to that point yet. But I think with our students, again, it's the same thing about being able to see those results. Anything else you want to share with how the process went with your students?
That was just the main thing, that I was surprised by how few knew what the question was. That, and so they were working for no purpose,
Mm-hmm.
because everything they were doing, every calculation they were doing, and they could figure out maybe whether they needed to add, subtract, multiply, or divide, but they didn't know that the final question required some extra step.
Right.
They just read so far, and that was that, and they didn't have the question.
That's it.
That's a real aha moment. And once students realize that they thought, but they found out they didn't, it really makes it so much easier to put in some new strategies, especially, like you said, where they actually had success from taking just a little bit more time. And as Susan and I talked with you, that process, that step-by-step process will get quicker if they apply it on an ongoing basis. And as we talked at the last time, most of us actually read problems 3 different times. We just do it so quickly and so automatically, we don't think about it. So that's a great comment. And Susan, just FYI,
Mm-hmm.
Jeff is listening with Mary Susan.
Mm-hmm.
So just in case we're looking for him, he is with us today, and they're not quite sure whether they have a mic that works or not. But just for your knowledge, make sure like to raise your hand. It is right above where it says names alphabetically. There's a little hand there, and all you have to do is click it, and it will raise your hand for you.
And that brings Jeff. I'm glad you made a comment there, and sent a question on or a note on to Bonnie because if you're not the one who's registered in and signed in on the list here, if you would just in the question box, just send a little note, and Bonnie will keep all those recorded to let us know that there are 2 people in this group and are 3 more people with me, and here are their names because we do keep the attendance from all of these, and then that'll be helpful in making sure that we know that we've recorded everybody who has been here today. So, Jeff, that really, I really appreciate that. And let me see if Mary Susan, can you hear us? And I'm not sure. I don't. I have Mary Susan unmuted, so undoubtedly they don't have a microphone that's working. Okay. Um, Bonnie, I think we got time for maybe just a couple more as we go through. And if I could, Lindsay, um, if you can talk with us just for a minute. Lindsay, can you hear us? Lindsay? Okay. I heard that drawer slam. Um,
I think Lindsay is there.
yes, she is. Lindsay?
Can you hear me?
Yes, finally.
Perfect.
You came
Oh,
through.
I didn't
You
know I
do
had a
have
mic.
a mic.
Yeah.
Oh, built in.
That's why we said, yes, we heard you closing that drawer.
No, I was pulling out my keyboard.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. You did something, and only a small percentage of people actually took on goals and givens. And so could you talk just a little bit about how that worked with your students and how they responded to it?
Well, I did a sequencing lesson where they had to come up with an equation very similar to when X goes in, Y comes out. So they had to make a chart uh, and then come up with the rule that would fit. And they did very well on it. Once, I modeled and they followed along, and then they had to do it on their own or in a group, and they did very well with the group, and then they had to tick it out, so they had to prove that they could do it on their own to get out of the class. So
Oh, okay.
it worked very well.
Well, you mentioned the one thing that you felt like was the most difficult with them was the conjecture section.
Yes. Yes.
And why do you what was the problem that you felt from that standpoint?
They didn't want to take a chance on guessing or estimating what the answer might be.
Okay.
They just wanted to go ahead and put paper and pencil together and try and work it out.
Okay. Yeah, that's I'm not surprised because first of all, it's getting them to just even to take the time, to do it.
Right.
But then that
Right.
whole idea of, it's just like with all students, what do they want? They want to be able to just get the answer and move on, those types of
Yes.
things. So, okay, now I appreciate that. Because again, like I said, there are very few people who took on the goals and givens. So I appreciate your feedback on that. So do we have any questions, Bonnie, that anybody has popped in with, or any hands
No.
up that of someone who's going to lay it on the line and talk to us? I don't see any hands up at this point, but what we
I
will
think we're going to have, I was going to say, I think we're going to have to practice the hands up for the next webinar so everyone knows. Yes.
What you and I could do is we could just put everybody's hands up, and
yes.
then they'd have to all talk. So, but anyhow, we will come back to that. But in the meantime, what Bonnie and I'd like to do is really thank you for the work that you have done with your students. Bonnie, I know that as I go through these, it's like having a chance to get a little window into a real classroom, and see what's going on and how students respond. And so we appreciate all of the work that each of you has put into this, and what a difference that it makes for your students as you're going through, and where they're going to be as we start moving on further into the institute, and when they move on into the actual test itself. So Bonnie, let's talk a little bit about this next face-to-face.
Oh, it is that A word, algebra. And it's one of those things that many of us, as we entered this new GED test, went, oh my goodness, because if you'll remember, on the 2002 version, only about 20 to 25% of the questions were algebra. And so many of our students said, you know what, I really don't need to answer those questions in order to pass the test. But on the 2014 version of the test, about 55% of the questions are algebraic reasoning. And Susan and I are going to focus on that R part of algebra, because when we look at the different strategies and definitely the different types of questions, it is all about algebraic reasoning. And that reasoning is very much an essential skill for all of us, not only as our students take the test, but as they face real life situations. So what we're going to do in the next session is we are going to focus again on using manipulatives, because what's an X or a Y? That can be a really difficult difficult concept for our students to understand. So we are going to use algebra tiles. Susan and I have both used those with students. In fact, I often will tell folks that by using algebra tiles when I was teaching in the K through 12 system, my students were really able to not only understand the basics of algebra, but to go all the way through quadratic equations. And although we know that students can't take algebra tiles into the test, it really is about teaching them how to understand those essential concepts. And then we're going to talk about how you translate those word problems to algebraic expressions and equations, that translation always being a concern to our students, just like it was in reading word problems. And as in the past, we're going to really do a lot of different strategies, activities, and things you can take back to use in the classroom. Because when we talk about algebraic reasoning, what we find is algebra is truly the gatekeeper to problem solving, critical thinking, and those higher order math skills. In fact, if you look back through history, you'll find that once upon a time, algebra was really taught at the very beginning of mathematical skills rather than at the end. And what Susan and I are seeing as we go into the K through 12 system is we're seeing more and more in kindergarten students working with algebraic reasoning. So we think instead of always seeing trouble with algebra, we really are going to see students who can do better at algebraic reasoning. So as we go forward, Susan, what kind of definition can we actually give to algebraic reasoning, or algebraic thinking as oftentimes we call it?
Well, I think I really like the whole issue that the way Mark Driscoll brings it up is that we're really looking at the ability to think about functions and how they work, and to think about the impact that a system structure has on calculations. It's more than just working with a bunch of letters. There's all of these different concepts that are involved within this. And I think for our students, what we want to do is, we want to move them past this big concern over how do I work with X and Y's and B's and C's, and look at how we put all those pieces together and what that forms. So, we're going to be looking, as we go into this next session, we're going to be talking about patterns. We are going to talk about variables because that is the issue with algebra that our students have. We're going to also really talk about expressions and equations and how we get things moving in terms of our students understanding what equations really are. And, for our students who are out there, they're struggling not just with, as Bonnie said earlier, just being able to compute something. They're struggling with, how do I move a word problem? How do I translate it? How do I create an expression or an equation based on what the word problem tells me? So we've got things that we have to do from there, and we're going to look at functions as well. One of the things that we have to keep in mind, because we still are dealing with a lot of students who, algebra, even though they've been working with algebra at lower and lower levels in the K through 12 system over the years, there are many of our students who just didn't have that. They didn't have that foundation. So there was always this fear of algebra and what it meant. And quite honestly, we've got to get past all that. So part of how we're going to go at this next session really is what they call CRA. We're going to start with something very concrete. Can I hold on to it? Can I hold it in my hands, just as we did when we were talking about geometry and we were using tangrams and we were using other items going through nets as we were going through? Start them there. That's why we're going to spend a good bit of our time working with algebra tiles. And for those of you who've used algebra tiles or who do use them on an ongoing basis, just you can help share your expertise as we're going through all this process too. But then we have to move them from concrete, because as Bonnie says, no, you can't go walking into the class, into the testing center with a set of algebra tiles, into that more representational or semi-concrete approach. unfortunately, what's happened for most of our students, and a large part of this comes back from the fact that um, they've been learning algebra from what's in a book, and that's very abstract. So we're going to go back to the beginning so we can build those skills that our students really need as they're working through. So we'll do those types of things, and we're also going to look at something else, and that's really about multiple ways that we represent things, so that students can see um, what they need to do in terms of working with um, equations itself, looking at the tiles, the written description, and the mathematical procedure. So hopefully we're going to have, one, I know it's not a hopefully, I know we're going to have a lot of fun because we have a lot of different things that we're going to approach with this. And Bonnie, if you could talk to us just a little bit about how these algebra tiles become so important to us.
You know, Susan, before I do, I would actually like to see a hand holding up. How many of you have ever worked? Sometimes they call them algebra tiles, math tiles, virtual tiles. By any other name, they're still algebra tiles. How many of you have ever used algebra tiles in your math classroom? And if you have, if you would please click on your name and that hand so we see how many hands go up.
I see one, two.
I promise I won't call on you today. We just want to have a feel for who in our group has ever used them.
It appears to me, Bonnie, we just have two people today
Okay.
who have worked with them. So this will be something new and fun as we go through and work with it.
That sounds good. First of all, Susan and I have real-world experience with them, and we have seen the success. But we also want to look at what does research tell us. And what research tells us is that students who have that access to the different types of virtual manipulatives, they do achieve higher gains than those students taught without manipulatives. And that important thing of when they use those hands-on, they're able to explain how and why algebraic problem solving works. And as we have worked with adult educators and have had this wonderful opportunity to meet some of the math gurus in the field, what we've seen over and over are our math gurus do use algebra tiles for those basic beginning concepts. In fact, what Susan and I will tell you is we promise we don't want to see algebra being taught by those big, thick books that we see in Algebra 1 courses in high school, but rather that application. So we all know that when students listen and they hear, when they see, they remember, but when they do, they understand. So we're going to use algebra tiles for everything from the basics of positive and negative integers all the way up to factoring. And so these types of tiles will provide not only that, but it very much they connect to geometric reasoning. And so just having all of those connection pieces really works very, very well. And as I said, we have had the opportunity to work with many of the gurus in math for adult ed, two of them being Myrna Manley and Linda Ginsberg. And seeing both of them work with algebra tiles, one of our friends in Maine who has worked so long with algebra tiles, and what has happened. So as we get ready for the next face-to-face workshop, let's talk just very briefly about what we'd like you to do. The first thing we want you to do is watch an algebra video. There's a series out from public broadcasting called The Math Dude. And Susan and I happened upon The Math Dude many years ago, and we thought that we had hit the mother lode. Because many of us use the Khan Academy, and Khan does a great job at a step-by-step. But what we like about The Math Dude is, first of all, when you go out to this website, I think what you're going to find is he has short videos for every big topic that we need to be teaching in our GED classrooms. The other thing that he does is he really puts a real-world spin on things. And so you have in your brain all of a sudden, oh, that's what that looks like in real-world situations. So we want you to go out to the Math Dude series and think about how you could use those videos. And we want you to select one of them that you found was really kind of that aha moment for you, and you said, I've been wondering how to teach this, and this will be great, a great video. Realize with these videos you can watch them online or you can download them, and they are free. So that's your first assignment to get ready. The second one, we just mentioned Myrna Manley and Linda Ginsburg, is they wrote back in 2010 a great article on algebraic thinking. And we promise you that it is not research that you say, oh my goodness, I lost it. But what Myrna and Linda did was they looked through and found those basics of what math instruction should look like in adult ed, and identifying the big ideas of algebraic reasoning that will help our students with, not only mastering, but will help us in developing lessons. So we want you to go ahead and read that article and then be prepared to share. We go through, again, sharing what you found in your pre-work, but also sharing strategies during this workshop that you use to make algebraic reasoning more real-world for your students, to make your students better in solving those types of problems. And Susan, as always, I believe their post-session assignments will be similar to what we've used. Am I correct?
Absolutely. They'll be short and designed for use in the classroom. We're definitely not going to make you go back and do a full session on algebra tiles, but possibly a portion of it, or it be an option for you as you go through. Again, always keeping in mind what's going to work for your classroom and giving you some options that you'll include an activity or some type of strategy to be used. It'll also include, just as we've done before, a reflection form. So you'll be doing the same type of thing, and then we'll be discussing those things at the follow-up webinar after all of the sessions are done. So again, Bonnie and I really want to make sure that whatever you're going to be asked to do is something that's going to have a positive impact on your students right now, and something that can be useful to you on an ongoing basis, and we don't want to take up tons of your time in terms of doing something other than what's in the classroom.
Definitely.
Because one of the things in this kind of as we're getting close to the end of this particular session, a couple of things we want you to remember is that arithmetic is doing something to numbers to get an answer, and that's what our students do. They do something to numbers. But algebra is really about looking at and exploring the relationships between numbers. And that's something we've got to work with our students on, is to understand, that was one of the things, I think, Bonnie, when you looked at that SQ, RQ, CQ, I have to always think it through. When you start looking at that problem solving process, it's the first one that we saw in that graphic organizer, where it really talks about the relationships between numbers. And so we're moving right on into that process. And so how are those different elements related to each other? And that's going to make a big difference, especially in helping students go through that process of learning how to translate a word problem into an equation or an expression, is to be able to put that relationship together. So we're going to be doing a number of different types of things. The entire session won't focus solely on algebra tiles. We'll have other things that we'll be working with as well as we're moving through. And there are resources that are out there that are available to you. We wanted today to make sure that we referred you to one specifically, and that was the Math Dude. And you can see over here in the corner the math dude. And Bonnie, I think part of the real connection piece for students with the math dude is the sense of humor that he brings into this, which makes something that students may be a little wary of. They actually now can kind of relax and laugh a little bit and realize that it's not anything to be afraid of. In fact, it's something that can make such a big difference.
Definitely, definitely. So, algebraically speaking, I have figured out that we have approximately 15 minutes and 36 seconds left for any questions, comments, etc.
So now is your chance to really practice your raising your hand skills as we go through. And oh, Lindsay has her hand up, but I believe that's from when you had your poll. Yep, it's been up for 10 minutes itself. A couple of other things while you're thinking about raising your hands. I know that on Edmodo, some of you have been posting your information on there. Some of you have had some difficulty with that. Bonnie and I are learning the process just as you are, so please bear with us as we go through, and we'll try to make sure that we get everything posted in that needs to be. But you know, we really appreciate that whole system, which allows us to go in and to access the different things that are there. Any questions? Do I see anybody? Bonnie, any other comments, concerns, things we need to discuss before we let them go today?
I don't think so. I just, please, we will tell you that what we have found when we work with manipulatives, just like when we worked with things such as the tangrams, sometimes manipulatives are much more frustrating for you and me than they are for our students. It's an aha moment for them, but because many of us have learned how to do algebra certain ways, and I'll be real specific, we learned how to use FOIL. When we don't do those but take different approaches, sometimes it really takes that very open mind of ours to see that there are many ways to do it. And again, it comes with the fact that we have practiced the same processes for so long that those are what's comfortable to us. So just please, again, make sure that as in the past, you come with an open mind, realizing we are all in this together, and when we do use manipulatives, they do get easier with time. Susan, there is a question. Will we be sending an email or posting on Edmodo about the reading assignment and the video link?
Yes. In fact, we will put that on Edmodo after we finish out this webinar today. The other thing that will be posted, but it'll be after next Monday, because we have another webinar on Monday for those who were unable to attend today. We'll have the links to the archives for this, if there was someone in your group or in your school who said, in fact, I do know I have one person who said, I'm on federal jury duty and is not going to be able, unless the judge changes the schedule, to attend either one of these. So I know he will actually be coming back and looking at the archive itself. So we'll make sure that these archives are on the Kentucky KYAE YouTube channel, but that is always done just a little bit after the webinars are finished up itself, so that you'll have access to those particular things. I do see a note from Mary Susan who says that she's used tiles, but not with algebra.
Yes.
And then also we have another question from Lisa Rosenberg who says, what are the dates for the next face-to-face? So, since Bonnie, I don't think we're going to have to worry about weather, having snow, let's put it that way, hopefully in April. Let's go through and we'll talk very briefly about those dates as we're going through. The first round will be the first week of April, and so we will be in Madisonville on April 6th. Glasgow on April 7th, and Louisville on April 8th. Then we skip a week, and the next thing we will be in London on April the 20th, Paintsville on April 21st, and Lexington on April 22nd. And we do know that we have some people who are going to be on spring break, so maybe you'll be able to attend one of those other sessions. What we'll do is we'll post into Edmodo all of the dates so that everyone has all the different locations. We just need to make sure that if anyone has to attend a session other than the one they normally go to, that we let Lita Ann at Morehead State University know that, so that she can do adequate planning as they're kind of moving through. And Bonnie, we have one other question that's come in. It's about what's the best resource to begin using algebra tiles?
Oh, there are so many out there. As far as resources, as you see here, there is one from Michigan State. Susan and I really like the one book that comes with the algebra tiles that we ordered. Illuminations also has a lesson plan on how to factor algebra tiles and all of those kinds of things. So please do not worry about any books that you have to buy. There are so many free things online. In fact, I promise you all you have to do is put in algebra tiles and you will get a lot of things. In fact, you'll notice on this slide there are even apps for algebra tiles for our phones. So we will provide you not only with the different resources, but very much a step-by-step that will be in your workbook, so that when you get back, you will know you'll be able to do those activities. But probably the best resource is that one working with algebra tiles out of Michigan State. It does give you a very much step-by-step. They've done a real good job even with PowerPoints.
Absolutely. And I think we have one other question about would we be at KYAE? And yes, Bonnie and I will be at KYAE. We're doing a pre-conference on Sunday?
Sunday.
That's right.
Yes.
Sunday the 10th. And then we also have a session on Monday, I think it is. Monday?
With social studies.
Okay. I'm trying to remember off of the top of my head what we've got at different points in time. And let's see, I think we have another question that's popped in. Oh, Lisa, yes, come on and join us for the session out at KYAE. Oh, Jackie Robertson, Bonnie, wanted to know what's the approximate cost of the tiles?
The tiles are about $70 for a classroom set of 30. And EAI education is probably one of the more reasonable. We'll show you that there are.
Oops, I think we just lost Bonnie's voice. Okay, she was talking about the fact of EAI education. They are online source that we go to. What we've found is that they're much less expensive than many of our other ones have been. So, and let's see, Bonnie? Okay. Let me do this. Just in case you cannot hear me, I'm going to put a note in the chat box. We appear to have a problem with our connection. So I am going to go ahead and on behalf of Bonnie and me, I'm going to say thank you for all of, for you being here with us this afternoon, and just say a goodbye and hope that each of you has, oh, I see that we've got our audio connection restored. Bonnie, are you back?
Oh, was I gone?
You were gone.
Okay.
Or at least I was talking to myself. So our network connection has been reestablished. So thank you, everybody. I'm not sure who was hearing everything that we were going on, but back to the cost of those tiles, $78 a set of 30 for the classroom. They're wonderful resource, plus they give you a book and other tiles that you can use, like overhead tiles that you can use, and so some wonderful resources that come along with that. So we really appreciate that all of you have been with us today. What we want to do is thank you, first of all, for being with us, but also we want to wish everybody a happy spring break, because I know that's going to be coming up before too long. Everybody seems to have different spring break at different times. So we want to wish you that. And also that we're really looking forward to this next session, where we're going to be taking on the thing that for many of our students has been quite a challenge. So having said that, Bonnie, anything else that you can think of?
Just thank you again for everything that you do with your students. As we've gotten to know you, your students are indeed very, very, what can I say? They should thank you every day for all the wonderful things you do. So thank you
And
guys and have a great spring break.
thank you. Goodbye, everybody.